but I am kind of curious to see where it goes. So I may complain and bitch and moan about it, but it's getting me. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Just Another Struggling Writer, the beleaguered author's one-stop shop for commiseration and hopefully inspiration. My name is Carrie Scher, and I am just another struggling writer. Well, today is the start of another reading vlog, and I am pleased to say that we are starting this vlog off on a positive note because I have just finished A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. And I'm even more pleased to say that my complaints about this book regarding Naomi Novik's particular writing style and the way that she does a lot of info dumping while at the same time hand-waving some of the lore, I still really enjoyed this. And I think I've been hovering kind of around a 3.75, and that still feels true, but since that doesn't fit neatly into any rating system, I'm going to bump this up to a 4. What can I say? I really enjoyed it. And it helps that this, while technically being a YA, does feel a little bit adultier. I liked our main character, Elle. I liked the relationships she was building over the course of the story with many characters that I also enjoyed learning about. And while I do feel like the central conceit requires a little bit of suspension of questioning, I still had a pretty good time with this book. The climax was gripping, the end reveal shocking. I only wish that this book was just about 75 pages longer. It's just over 300 pages as it stands, and I think that if there was a little bit more in it, Naomi Novik could have punctuated all of the introspection, the internal monologue, the info dumping that she's giving us through Elle's perspective with more character interaction and character-driven moments between them. But I feel like that's kind of a minor gripe. I still really enjoyed it. Like I said, I'm going to give it 4 stars. But what I'm most excited about is now that I've finished it, I get to draw another book out of my TBR Mimic. As you may recall, the way I'm doing my TBR this month is I'm just drawing one random book at a time. That way I just don't feel like I have so many books looming over me. It's just a fun little game I'm playing with myself. So we've got my TBR Mimic friend. He is freshly topped up after doing a kind of big update. I had over 30 books I needed to add in, and he's getting pretty full. So I think instead of mixing him up myself, what I'm going to do is just give him a little shake. There we go. And then just take one kind of off the top here. Oh, I've got 2. What does that mean? So I accidentally got 2, 36 and 97. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at both and then pick the one I like better, or the one that I feel better about. Okay, so 36 came out to The Song of the Forever Rains by E.J. Mello, and I didn't go with that one, but not because of anything about the book itself. It's just that it's an ebook, and I'm trying to get through some library reads right now, so I was really hoping for a physical book. Fortunately, number 97 came out to Spellbreaker by Charlie N. Holmberg. And all I know about this one, it is kind of a gas lamp fantasy. I also know that it's another one on the shorter side, which means, yeah, less than 300 pages, which means this is another book I can probably cruise through this week. I'm really trying to get back on a 2-book-a-week schedule, and I think this will really help me since my library reads right now are very long. All right, so since 97 was the one I picked, I am putting number 30... 97 was the one I picked, so 36 is going back in to be picked at a later date. And there we have it. So I've got my next book for the month, and I finished a book that I feel really strongly about. So all told, I think this is a great way to start this reading vlog. But I've also got a very short update for you. I did read a little bit more of The Bone Witch by Rincha Pecco. Unfortunately, there's just not much to say, I just don't feel very connected to the story because I just don't have a sense of what it is yet, even though I'm 22% in. Or the main character just she doesn't stand out to me. I don't know how much longer I'm going to pursue this book. It does feel a little bit like a slog to get through because I don't feel connected to it. But at the same time, I feel like if I just let that go, I could fly through it because I wouldn't care. So, pros and cons. I've also got The Dragon Rider by Taran Matharu out, as well as The Phoenix King by Aparna Verma, and a couple others as well that I can choose from. But I think for now, I'm going to try and stick with the Bone Witch and try and get that done. So that's my update. Thank you so much for watching. I will be back tomorrow, hopefully with more to report either on Spellbreaker or the Bone Witch. Hey y'all, just checking in for a quick reading update. Quick because I didn't get hardly any reading done today. I actually spent most of my day trying to figure out which library book I wanted to read next, since I DNF'd The Bone Witch by Rin Chapeko. I had a couple of options. I think I had like 4 books that were all due back at the same time. And unfortunately, none of them really reached out to me. I tried like the first chapter of a couple of them and they just weren't really hitting. And so I ended up returning like 4 books back early with the intention of getting those that I had tried back at another time when I'm just feeling a little bit more, I don't know, energized. I think my problem is I'm still feeling a little bit slumpy, and books that don't grab me or don't have anything really pulling me along right away are just not going to make the cut right now. I need something that grabs me in immediately, or like something off my physical shelf that is like motivating me to keep pushing through. So yeah, unfortunately, I just wasn't feeling it today. So what I did finally choose a library book. It is The Traitor's Blade by Sebastian de Castell, which is the first book in the Greatcoat series. I've heard a lot about it on JD Ray Reads channel. It's like one of her favorite of all time series and books and all of that. And a like companion series just started from the same author to that Greatcoat series, so which I do own. I got it in a book box. So I just kind of figured that if I want to read more from this author, I should probably read this series first. Fortunately, it's not too long. It's like 400 pages. Some of the other ones were, between 500 and 600. So that'll kind of motivate me to, the shortness will kind of motivate me to plow through it. Again, that wasn't decided until really late in the day. And so I read the first chapter, and the writing is fine, on the good side of fine. So I think I'll be okay with making that my digital read for the week. And then, of course, my physical read is Spellbreaker by Charlie N. Holmberg. Let me go get it. I read the prologue so far, and that's it. I'm going to get a little bit more reading done here shortly. It's just been one of those evenings where I'm playing catch up from yesterday. I always overextend myself on Mondays. It's just hard because I have swimming lessons that takes up a little bit of extra time, and then I'm also just trying to cram in a bunch of filming, and it usually doesn't work out for me. Yesterday it didn't work out for me because I was trying so hard to finish A Deadly Education. So I haven't gotten to my books this evening quite yet, but I'm gonna settle in and go do that now. And that's it. Unfortunately, that's my whole update for the day. I am glad to kind of finally have settled on a digital book. I think I'm gonna, if I have a choice, I'm gonna go for a digital book in my next TBR read out of my random draw, and maybe that'll kind of loosen up my anxiety over what I have out of the library. But anyway, so that's it. I will check in with you tomorrow. Like I said, I'm going to go do a little bit of reading right now, so I'll have something to actually talk about with you tomorrow. Hey everyone, just checking in with a quick reading update before I go to bed, and today has been kind of a weird reading day. I have read a little bit in a lot of books. A lot here meaning 3 different books, which is a lot for me to be reading at one time. First, I got to about the 15% mark of The Traitor's Blade by Sebastian de Castell. This is the first book in the Greatcoat series, which I've heard a little bit about, mostly from Jade from JD Ray Reads. And I gotta say, I'm a little bit disappointed. This is one of her favorite series of all time, and I just find it to be a little bit generic. We're just following these guys who were once these respected, I don't know what the term is, but they were like this group, almost like musketeers that served the king, but the king was deposed, and now these men are reviled and thought of as traitors and pretty much hated. But their loyalty to the dead king persists, and they are on this quest, which was their former patron's like final request of them. It's just fine. It's not bad. It's just very generic. I was expecting something super impressive. I'm just not here. I'm going to continue reading. There's no reason not to, really. And it's possible that the first 15% is not representative of the rest of the story. So I'm going to keep reading. Then I got to about the 25% mark of Spellbreaker by Charlie N. Holmberg. And this is another one that just feels kind of fine. In this, we follow a young woman named Elsie who has the somewhat rare ability to break spells. Usually magic in this world comes in the form of spell making and spell casting, and not a lot of people can break spells. And because magic is a form of power in this world, people who can break spells are closely watched. So she is kind of running unregistered on behalf of a group who rescued her as a child. And she doesn't know anything about this group or why they ask her to break certain spells, but to the observant reader, you would suspect that it might not be for entirely up and up reasons, but she doesn't know that. She thinks that because they rescued her as a girl, it's all very nice. That's really my biggest complaint with this. Come on, girl. They won't tell you who they are. They won't tell you why you're doing this. Some unfortunate happenings have occurred after you've broken certain spells. Let's put it together. But again, it's just fine. It's just fine. It's not really super impressive writing, and the world building is a little bit... I kind of like the idea of the magic. It's rune based, and I also have a story kicking around up here where the magic is also rune based, so I'm really fascinated by that. It just feels a little surface level at this point. I think that might be because this turns into more of a fantasy romance than focusing more on the fantasy, which is fine. Again, it's just I prefer the fantasy over the romance, and so I always feel a little bit underwhelmed by the fantasy elements in these kinds of stories. But we'll see. Like I said, it's just fine, and it reads very quickly. So that is Spellbreaker. And then I ordered the second and third book of the Sholomance series, and they arrived today. Unfortunately, the Golden Enclaves came damaged, but I decided to poke my nose into the beginning of the second book, The Last Graduate, because the first book ends on quite an interesting cliffhanger, and I just wanted to see if the second book picks up right after or if there is a time jump. You know, sometimes there's a time jump, and then sometimes it's like in the very next moment. And I was curious to see which one this was. And I ended up reading like the first 10%, the first 40 pages. I usually don't do this. Usually I require a little bit of time between entries of a series because I just get tired of being in the same world for an extended period of time, and that tends to make my feelings a little bit pickier if I'm reading them back to back. And I don't know, maybe it's because I had to do that thing where I was just hand waving away any questions, and so I wasn't super engaged with the setting in particular because I just kept having to go, it's just the way it is, instead of thinking really deeply about it. I don't feel that compulsion to take a step back. I want to keep reading. And something I realized as I was reading this first 10% is that I really do like the main character. I have been struggling lately with main characters, especially female main characters who are just not good people, just ugly, mean-spirited, just bitchy, just unlikable. And Elle in this series is all of those things, but she's also not all of those things. She she has, kind of had an upbringing where just the vibe she gives off makes people dislike her. And so that has, calloused her into this kind of standoffish, rude person because she doesn't have any close relationships because no one wants to be close with her. And over the course of the last book, we saw that change. And already in this book, we're seeing more and more of that develop. I love that. One of my favorite books that I have read over the last 5 or 6 years was Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. That story features a very similar main character who is kind of wild and a little bit violent and has never really trusted anyone, but what drives her the most is friendship. And I think that is a theme that I really am drawn to, is when these girls who don't have anything to live for or to give, they find friendship, and that is what motivates them. I guess that's something that I have come to love. And so even though Elle is bitchy and in parts of the first book, I was like, God, there's no need for this. I still find myself rooting for her and wanting her to succeed, especially in the area of forming and maintaining these friendships. I don't know that I'm going to prioritize this much. I am going to keep it on my nightstand and pick it up intermittently, which is coincidentally what I'm doing with Assassin's Apprentice as well, which is still sitting over there, just picking it up and reading a few pages at a time. But I'm curious to see where this goes. I haven't had this feeling where I want to binge read, not since I've returned to reading, like in a major way over the last 5 or 6 years. So this is revolutionary for me. So well done. And that's just about it for my reading updates today. I'm going to prioritize the Traitor's Blade and Spellbreaker before the end of the week. But like I said, I am going to be dinging away at The Last Graduate and Assassin's Apprentice, and then I've also got some other library books out. Anyway, that's my update. I will check in with you guys tomorrow once I've done a little more reading. Hey everyone, checking in for a quick reading update. I got to about 25% of The Traitor's Blade, or is it just Traitor's Blade? By Sebastian de Castell, the first in the Greatcoat series, and I am of two minds for this book. First, it is very generic. It's very white male fantasy. Very white male fantasy. But I am kind of curious to see where it goes. So I may complain and bitch and moan about it, but it's getting me. I am gonna finish it, which is more than I can say for Spellbreaker. I am DNFing at about 30%. I read a little bit more today, and I just don't like the writing. That's really all it comes down to. The main character, Elsie, just doesn't feel distinct as a character at all. She's in the situation where she's being blackmailed into helping this person, and it seems like the writer is trying to generate witty banter because they're obviously love interests eventually, but it feels very, very forced and fake. It doesn't feel accurate for the character of Elsie that we've gotten so far, and also the plot that brought these two characters together feels very contrived. And I mean, that's true of most romances. Let's all be honest. But it's just not working here. It just doesn't work for me. I just don't care for the writing. I did consider soft DNFing it and just coming back to it later, because I am feeling right now that I just want to consume books. And I could, in theory, power my way through this one. It's not very long, but I don't want to ruin the momentum that I'm building, finally clawing my way out of that reading slump by forcing myself to read a book that I'm not going to like. And so that is kind of where I'm at. I'm going to DNF it. I may or may not put it on my Unhauls shelf. What's getting me is that there's merit. I like the magic system a lot in this. I love rune-based magic. I have a story idea that's like second or third down on my list of stories to write that is rune-based. And I do love the idea of spell makers and spell breakers being like separate forms of magic. But there's just a lot of ideas in here that just don't feel very well described or defined. And again, I know that's because this is probably more of a romantasy than a fantasy. And I could probably power through it if the writing felt stronger, but it doesn't. So I'm gonna make the decision to unhaul or just keep it later. But for now, I'm definitely DNFing, which means I get to draw another number. I honestly did not DNF it just so I could draw another number. I promise. But I get to draw another number. So let's shake him up. And I'm not going to be picky about a physical or a digital read, although I do have several library books I need to finish. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and get this one right off the top. We have number 49. Okay, 49 is a book that I have already started and DNF'd. It's called Winter Be My Shield by Joe Spurrier. I tried reading it in the very first month of 2024. And I DNF'd it at about 20%. There was just nothing happening in the plot. Nothing happened in that book at 20%. So we get to draw another number. Let's do another shake. So that didn't work from the top. So what about one from the bottom? Kind of opposite end of the spectrum. Ooh, 146. Okay. 146 is The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, and I'm really struggling with if I want to read this or not right now, because I did just start the Foundry Side trilogy. I don't know what the trilogy is called, but the trilogy that starts with Foundry Side in June. I loved Foundry Side. I gave it 5 stars, and then I took a step back from this series because I just prefer to. I have found that if I binge read a series, I like it less and less and less because I just feel so, not bored, but just kind of overwhelmed by being in the same setting for so long. And so because I love Foundry Side so much, I knew that I would best enjoy the next book and the the third book eventually if I took a break in between. And I don't know how I feel about starting another series by the same author while I have one pending. Is it the start of a series or is it a standalone? It would make you feel better if it's a standalone. It's a series. Well, okay, I'm just gonna trust the Mimic. The Mimic gave me the Tainted Cup, and so I will start the Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. So that is my next TBR read. And that's everything for today. Not a very exciting update, I know, but like I said, I am feeling kind of ravenous for books right now. So I anticipate getting a bunch more reading done. I do hope to finish Traitor's Blade tomorrow or Saturday. That will only give me one book finished since I don't see myself finishing 2 400-page books in 3 days. Oh well, it is what it is. So I will leave you with that, and I will check in with you tomorrow to let you know how it goes. Hey y'all, just checking in with a quick reading update. It is now Saturday morning, and I have read the first 100 pages of The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. And what I will say is I don't think I love this quite as much as I immediately loved Foundryside. The main character, Din, is fine. And his employer, Anna, who is like the Sherlock Holmesian type character, I've never really liked them. I don't like the quirkiness. I don't like the smug know-it-allness of the Sherlock Holmes type characters, which this is very much based on. It even says it on the back. So I'm not just making that conclusion out of nowhere. And I just really don't like that kind of dynamic unless it is very specifically subverted. Like, I love the CBS Elementary show with Lucy Liu as Watson because it subverts a lot of those tropes and expectations that you find normally in a Sherlock and Holmes story. Holmes and Watson story. I haven't really seen that just yet, and so it's not my favorite dynamic, but I do still really love Robert Jackson Bennett's writing. It's very compelling. This is a whole new world that is kind of interesting. The magic is plant-based. I kind of love that. It is so different, and the world is kind of this empire where there are big monsters coming from the sea, and they're constantly trying to attack the mainland, I guess. And so the entire empire is based around making sure that they survive those attacks and all of that. And meanwhile, we've just got this little murder mystery to solve. Right when I put it down, we are starting to get broader implications of that murder mystery. So while the dynamic of the characters aren't my favorite, the writing is still really compelling, the world is still really compelling, the murder mystery is still really compelling. So there's no reason for me to really be mad at this. And there's nothing to say that character dynamic that I don't like won't improve as the book goes on. Of course, in all Holmes and Watson stories, there's friction and there is a abundance of that quirkiness that comes from the Holmes character. That's true of all of the adaptations. You just have to, and then as the story goes on, there's more depth. So I am also anticipating that. I think that'll probably get better. So not quite what I expected. I didn't really know anything about it when I picked it up other than it was a murder mystery. So I'm pleasantly surprised while also being kind of cautious about the character dynamics. So not a bad start. And then I also read another 5%. I think I'm up to 32% in Traitor's Blade by Sebastian de Castell. I'm just not really feeling very inspired to read it a lot right now. Again, I just don't feel, it just doesn't feel like my kind of story. He also does that thing where he is stopping the action to have flashbacks and show how he got to this point. I really don't like that writing style. That was true in Six of Crows and other books that kind of have that dynamic. To me, flashbacks aren't the story, and if you need them to make the story, then you need to rethink why you're telling this story in this way. I have always felt that flashbacks in that density completely kills the momentum of the plot. But that's just me, again, just a personal preference. So that is my reading update for today, but I've also got an unhaul planned for the day. I'm about to go to Half Price Books and drop off some unhauls and maybe pick up some new ones. So I just wanted to go over the books that I am unhauling, and then I will show off the books that I am picking up. So the first one is this mass market paperback of Mistborn. I picked it up just in case I could find the others, but I haven't. And I still actually haven't ever read a Brandon Sanderson book. I went and checked out Elantris from the library, but it's got like a 15-week hold on it. So I am going to start from the beginning. Just that's the way my brain works. I have to start from the beginning, even though I know that these are all independent series, even though they do interlock. I know about the Cosmere and all that. I just need to start from the beginning. I just do. So I'm going to go ahead and wait for my Elantris hold to come in, and that will be where I start with Brando Zando, and then we'll just decide what my opinion is from there. And so I just don't really feel like I need a mass market paperback of one book. I also have these copies of Fool's Errand and Fool's Fate. I now have the newer released versions of these. Don't need these anymore. Same with Kushiel's Dart. They may not even take this. It is so beat up. But again, I have a newer, larger copy. I don't need this mass market. I don't even know where this came from. I rediscovered it as I was doing my physical library star predictions. I don't know anything about it. I can already tell you that this kind of cover tells me it's probably not for me. No idea where this came from. One Dark Window, I read last month and was really disappointed by it. I liked the magic system, but the main character was kind of awful. The reveal at the end was entirely predictable, and the character dynamics, the plot, kind of a disappointment. The Trespasser by Tana French. This came from Book of the Month back when I first had a subscription, like in 2016, but I never read it because it's, I think, like a mystery or a thriller. Ditto for Killers of the Flower Moon. Came in Book of the Month. Never read it. I'm probably not going to read it. So those are my unhauls. Let's go to the bookstore. Y'all, can you believe that? Not only is this the signed Fairy Loot edition, it came with all like the goodies inside, like all of the items that came in the box. I don't know who in the Metroplex area was offloading all of their Fairy Loots, but my God. So I got The Stardust Thief, obviously, which was one of my favorite books that I read last year. I really loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars, really, really close to 5, but I didn't have a 5-star last year. So again, one of my top books of 2023. And then I also decided to pick up Forged by Blood by Eggebor Åkesson. I have had this book in my Kindle library for a little while. I've been meaning to read it. I know it's a YA, but I do love African-inspired fantasy. And again, it is so pretty. And this is also the signed edition. There were some others, as you saw, but I just didn't feel like I could spend $100 getting them all when I don't feel confident that I'm even going to like the books. I was tempted. I'm not going to lie to you. I was really tempted. So those are the two Fairy Loots that I picked up. Could not be more thrilled, especially with the Stardust Thief. But then I also picked up Fathomfolk by Eliza Chan. This has been on my holds at the library for weeks, so now I can just take it off my holds. So pretty excited about that. And then I also picked up Heart of the Sun Warrior, which is the sequel to Daughter of the Moon Goddess. Unfortunately, my copy of Daughter of the Moon Goddess is the paperback. So I'm going to have to do something about that because they're not going to match. But again, very, very pretty. And then lastly, I got the Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicle Omnibuses 1 and 2. Tsubasa is a clamp manga that is a story about Shaoran and Sakura in an alternate universe. If you know anything about me, you know that Cardcaptor Sakura is one of my favorite anime manga series of all time. So And Tsubasa actually kind of tangentially inspired another story idea I have rattling up here. So pretty excited about those. And that's it. That's my whole haul. Although I was really, really tempted to walk out with a whole hell of a lot more. There was a couple more of the Witcher books that I thought about picking up. There was a copy of the Tainted Cup with the dust jacket. This one that came in the box that I got it in didn't have the dust jacket, which I kind of like, but I kind of almost wish that it had one. There was like a bind up of, or like a box set of all of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books that I've been trying to get my son to read for years. There was a lot of Naomi Novik books. They had Spinning Silver and the other standalone. But I decided to just walk away with my 2 special editions and the other 2 books and some manga. And wow, I still just can't get over this. I can't. I'm so excited about this. I really hope when Ashfire King comes out that I'm able to get the Fairy Loot edition now that I'm on the subscriber list to go with this guy. Oh man. Wow. I don't know who you are out there, person, but thank you. And I don't know who hurt you, but I'm sorry. Okay, so that is it. I am going to go hang out with my partner, have a little nerd date, and I will check in with you when I've actually gotten some reading done. Hey y'all, it is now Saturday night. I hadn't intended on updating again, but I just read something so horrific and appalling that I had to. I had to come talk about it. So I was just reading Traitor's Blade by Sebastian de Castell, and I have mentioned before that it feels very white male generic fantasy, and that is true in so many ways. Our main character Falkio is a man who is dedicated to good and justice and upholding the law and honor and doing what is right, and the memory of his dead king and his wife who was fridged in a flashback, brutally raped and murdered. Can't have a white male hero without that, of course. Falkio is not the best fighter, but a very smart fighter, a great tactician who can, who may not always win, but can overcome seemingly insurmountable odds, who loves to read and knows all about lore and history and singing and can outsmart his opponents and can even duel assassins that no one ever survives and win, and all of that stuff that comes with these white male fantasies. And I was prepared to just be like, you know what, fine. I just want to finish the book so I can cross it off my list. But then we got to the climax, or the lead up to the climax, and our heroes are in pretty dire shape when who should appear but a priestess of a sex goddess. And not only did she announce that she has been in her position since she was 13, and that's not questioned at all, that a girl of 13 was working as a priestess, and it is implied that she was doing sex goddess stuff at 13. That's just brushed over. Then in the very next scene, what should happen is, and I am so sorry, but I have to give a trigger warning for sexual assault. Our main character, when he realizes what is about to happen, says, "Please don't," literally, in quotations, please stop. And then our sex priestess decides to tie him to the bed and proceed anyway. And I was so horrified and appalled. And I could not even continue. I could not read another page. And I imagine that fans of this author and fans of this book are going to be like, no, Carrie, it's okay. It actually healed him. And to you people, okay, I can't listen to that. I can't listen to that. I can't accept it, because we all know that if this was a female character who was weeping and saying, please stop, and she was tied to the bed, what would we think of this scene? But evidently Sebastian de Castell doesn't think men can be raped, and that to me is appalling. And it is an automatic disqualifier for any of his other books. I will be immediately unhauling the other 2 that I have on my shelves. Automatic persona non grata in my book. That is appalling. And that's where I'm at. So I immediately DNF'd, And I never want to think about this book again, or the author, or anything that comes out of this book. So that's my update. I'm so sorry it had to be so graphic and so upsetting, but I just would like to plead to authors out there, please don't fucking do this. Please don't fucking do this, because this is horrific. Anyway, so that's my update. I need a brain cleanse. I don't know how I'm gonna do it. I have What Feasts the Night next up in my library checkout, so maybe I'll settle in with some wholesome tea kingfisher mushroom zombies. And on that note, good night. Good morning. It is now Sunday morning, and I have slept on Traitor's Blade, and I have decided I have one more thing to say. Chiefly that if you're someone who enjoys this series, if it has brought you a lot of joy and comfort over the years, I truly am happy for you. It simply could not be me. Knowing that something so horrific is just basically just brushed off, I can't read it. I can't even bring myself to read anything else published by this author. Maybe his other books don't have this kind of egregious moment, but I'm not going to be finding out, because I'm not going to put myself in that sort of mental space ever again by choice. So, closing the book on that, I did end up starting and finishing What Feasts at Night by T. Kingfisher to kind of purge away Traitor's Blade. And I'm of two minds. One is that I needed it after last night. And secondly, that, I don't know, it just wasn't as good as What Moves the Dead. And my only really complaint with What Moves the Dead is that I had already read a book with a kind of similar component. Like the chief driving factor of the horror was basically the same. And I only read them 3 months apart. And so as I was getting into What Moves the Dead, I sort of realized what was happening. And I was like, oh, I just read a book like this. So I think I would have enjoyed it more if there had been a little bit more distance. Fall of the House of Usher is one of my favorite Edgar Allan Poe stories. And so that also buoyed it a little bit. But also it made it so that we already knew what the stakes were. We already had a sense of the tension and the stakes going into the story, on page 1. What Feasts at Night didn't really have that. I understand it's not a retelling of any kind. It's just more like a folklore story. But I do wish that T. Kingfisher had done another Poe retelling. I would have honestly loved an entire series of short stories of Alex Easton going through the various horror stories of Edgar Allan Poe. Honestly, that would be a 5 out of 5 slay. So I was a little bit disappointed that we didn't get that here. Still, it has Alex Easton, who is one of my most favorite characters I've read this year, and T. Kingfisher's just really great writing. Like I said, I was just a little bit disappointed, and this book does take quite a while to kind of get going. It's very short. It's only 150 pages. So when you're already a third of the way into the book and we haven't really established much of the spooky part, it felt a little slow. So I think I'm going to give it a 3.5, the same as I gave What Moves the Dead. But I think if you asked me if I had read this without what preceded it, I probably would have only given it a 3. But I'm going to stick with 3.5 because it did help me cleanse, weirdly enough, a horror story cleansed a different kind of horror, but it is what it is. So that's going to wrap up this reading vlog. Not quite as successful as I had hoped. I DNF'd technically 2 books. I'm counting Traitor's Blade as I finished it. I got to 65%, 67%, I think, and I would have finished. I probably would have even finished it last night if it hadn't been for that moment. So I'm counting it as I finished it. If it weren't for that part, I probably was going to give it a 2.5 or maybe even a 3, acknowledging that this brand of white male fantasy just isn't for me. But because of that scene, it has to be a 1. So 1 book DNF'd, 1 book mostly finished, but had to put down for, safety reasons. And then a 3rd novella finished. So not my best week of reading, but I'm pretty pleased with myself for continuing with my streak of reading. Oh, and then I also started The Tainted Cup. I'm about a third of the way through that now, and I'm enjoying it. So I think if I tallied my pages together, I'm just over 600 pages in the week, so not terrible, not bad at all. So I've changed my mind. I'm pleased with this week of reading, and I'm looking forward to seeing what I get into next week. So thank you so much for watching. I so appreciate it. If you like my content, please like and subscribe. In my next video, I don't know what I have for you yet. I'm still kicking around some ideas, but I hope you look forward to it, and I will see you then.